Welcome to this episode of Genealogy Short Takes. Today we'll talk about Freedmen's bank records. The Freedmen's Bank, also known as the Freedmen's Saving and Trust Company, was set up in 1865 to benefit those who were freed from enslavement. Though it has a similar name, the bank is not associated with the Freedmen's Bureau. Branches were opened in cities with large African American populations, mostly in the South. Many African American churches and institutions had accounts too. Over time, there were 37 branches and over 70,000 people had opened accounts. Unfortunately, the bank failed due to overexpansion, mismanagement, and corrupt practices. Its assets were not protected by the federal government, and many people lost their savings. Freedmen's bank records are in HeritageQuest Online, a database available in library and from home with a Buffalo and Erie County Public Library card. I'll show you how to access and search Freedmen's bank records shortly. First, let's look at some examples. The focus of this class are the bank's signature registers. For identification purposes, the individuals registering for an account had to provide detailed information about themselves. The registers may provide connections between family members, connections to locations, and connections to an ancestor's enslaved life. This is a typical example. It's the record for John Riggs. His name is at the top of the entry. Mr. Riggs's age is listed as about 29 and his complexion as dark brown. One of the most important aspects of these records is that they show a person's movement. The registers typically ask where a person was born, where they were brought up, and the current residence. Mr. Riggs was born in Camden County, North Carolina, was brought up in Norfolk County, Virginia, and his current residence is listed as 2nd Ward, Little Rock, Arkansas. These records can also be thought of as a city directory substitute for places that didn't have directories or for directories that did not record African Americans. Just like directories, the current residence is given. In this example, we learn that Susan Caitlin's residence is historically significant. She lives on Snow's Row, also known as Snow's Court and Snow's Alley. It was in the Foggy Bottom Historic District in Washington, D.C. The alley was established in the 1850s when the area was mainly industrial. Snow's Court was a predominantly Irish alley, but during the Civil War, it became a barracks for disabled soldiers in the Union Army. After the war, an influx of freed African Americans came to the city looking for housing. Many settled in alleys, including Snow's Court. Snow's Court had a reputation for being a dangerous, overcrowded neighborhood with much subpar housing, but it was also considered a close-knit neighborhood where members were reliant on one another for help. Professions are given, often with more specificity than is seen in directories or even census records. In these examples from Vicksburg, Mississippi, Andrew Crutcher is a brick molder and works for Morgan and Fletcher, and John Adams is a steamboatman on the steamer Calumet. The remarks column may include extra details. The top listing says, going to work for Fort Smith and L.R. Railroad Company. That's Little Rock Railroad Company. The middle entry says, attended Mr. Battler's school. And at the bottom, boards at present with Mrs. Betsy, or maybe Betty, Armstrong. The bank even marketed itself to school children. In these examples, you can see the children's ages and the names of their schools. This example is from the New York City branch. This location seems to have the most school children. One of the most important things that Freedmen's bank records provide are family member names. These detailed listings were important to record for personal identification, as well as to identify beneficiaries in the case the depositor passed away. These are 3 siblings, and it's interesting to see the names and details that they all give. You can see that they record father, mother, brothers and sisters, and even the children's ages are listed. It's clear from the family entries that there are some half-sibling relationships between these children, but they all list the same parents' names. On the left, Martha's entry lists a sister's brother, Bill Griffin Anderson, and in the middle, Walter's entry lists half-brother Bill Griffin Anderson. Looking at both entries together makes the names easier to understand. In Walter's record, Bill Griffin Anderson is split on two lines and could be mistaken for two individuals. But Martha's listing of the name makes it clear that there is one person due to the parentheses. Walter and Martha's entry also lists additional deceased siblings than Charles's entry does. These individuals were found by the C references at the bottom of their entry. So always pay attention to those and look those up if there's one for your relative. Here are some more examples of family details that you might see. The entry for Jane Keaton on the left shows two husbands' names. Her second husband is Jerry Keaton, who she has been married to for 20 or more years, and the father of all of her children was John Sutton. On the right, Charles Roberson's entry shows extended family members. In addition to his immediate family, his grandparents as well as aunts and uncles are named. Sometimes you'll see notations that family members were sold off during their enslavement. In Dilla Warrens' entry, her husband, Pompey Nixon, was sold off 17 years before the war. Her children, Harriet Ann and Ned Clark, were also sold. Her mother, Harriet Nixon, was carried away 17 years before the war, along with her brothers, Ned Clark and Alan. And her sister, Ann Carter, had been sold away 35 years ago. Sometimes in the earliest records, usually between 1865 into 1867, enslavers were named. In this example, Mary Drysdale's enslavers were John and Mary Stoddard. Looking at nearby entries, two more people, Henrietta Saxton and Philip Lucengus, were also enslaved by Stoddard. These could be family members or important connections. Sometimes it's noted if an individual was free versus a formerly enslaved person. This is a more unique form that is found for some of the early Charleston, South Carolina records. One of the questions asked is old title of the depositor, meaning a previous name. So you may find a name change of an ancestor on these forms, though usually the name is listed as the same as the current name. The concept of the Freedmen's Bank first came about as a place for Black soldiers to deposit their military pay. So Civil War military service details are listed. Here it says Robert Beasley served with the 34th U.S. Colored Troops Company E, which was an infantry company. It also states that he drove cattle while with Sherman during the war. Some whites also joined the bank. It may have been because it was the nearest bank to their home. I find this to be especially the case for the New York City entries. Great details on many European immigrants can be found in the New York City records. Here, Mary Daly was born in Waterford County, Ireland, and has been in the United States for 18 years. It also lists many of her family members, whether they're living and where they are currently living if still alive. To access HeritageQuest Online, go to the library's website, buffalolib.org, select the Research and Resources link. Under Research, Databases A to Z. From home, right here where my mouse is under Databases A to Z, you'll have to put in your library card. If you're in library, you won't need to input a card. Then go down to the genealogy category and then select HeritageQuest Online. Click on the search button And if you scroll down, you'll see the Freedmen's Bank database. If you're curious to see what cities had banks, you can go over to the right under Browse this collection, choose Registers of Signature Depositors, and there you can see the different locations. To search for someone, simply put in their name. I'm searching for Daphne Williams. You can see that the database does a good job of finding alternate spellings for Daphne. People's relatives are indexed too. So if you hover over View Records, you'll see a list of their family members, and that will help you better identify if you're looking for the right person. When you're ready to view the record, click View Record. Then you'll be able to see some of the transcribed information and click on the image of the signature registers. You look towards the top, there's Daphne Williams. Going back to the search screen, you can edit the search if you want to search for a different name. I mentioned that you can search for the family members mentioned on the register. So one strategy, if you're not sure what surname your family might have gone by, you could try to search for first names. If you know a couple of the first names, you could search for them together on the same record. This is especially helpful if you have some unique surnames. So I'm going to search for the surname Titus, and in the keyword field, I'm going to put a second surname. I'm going to put in Minta. You could also put a name in these specific fields if that's the relationship. And you can see here, here's a Titus Iggins, and there's a Minta. And it turns out that Minta was his wife. Unfortunately, one of the things that you can't do that may be helpful in identifying family members or acquaintances is you can't search for enslavers' names. For some reason, those aren't indexed in HeritageQuest Online. If you have any questions about searching HeritageQuest, you can come visit us in the Grosvenor rooms, email us, or call the library. Thank you so much for joining us.